Good evening and good afternoon, everybody. I would also like to thank all the organizers for this conference and the fact that this space was also introduced to deal with this topic. In spite of the fact that it is like 70 years old, it is still very young in our reality, in our setting. So my speech will revolve around the topic of the giving an overview, a general overview, but I would also like to bring a little bit the thinking behind the augmentative and alternative communication (AAC). So it is a little bit ambitious as a project, but we will do it, even if time is not that much. Well, the most important aspect I would like to highlight is from something that was shown by all the presentations, is the fact that even if we do have a very wide, broad variety of these diagnoses, so GNAO1, they are very different from each other, but we have on the one hand the movement difficulties and disorders, on the other hand communication disorders. These aspects are connected to each other. This is a barrier for discovery, for experiences, and also in terms of communication capacity and ability and global communication, but above all a barrier to the possibility and the opportunity to express the highest level of autonomy possible for the person through a cross-cutting approach and multidisciplinary approach in order to take care of the patient in a global, comprehensive way, and also through the so-called augmentative and alternative communication. All those things can be dealt with and also overcome or tackled. But what do we mean by augmentative and alternative communication? Because nowadays there is just a very positive aspect, because in Italy there is a lot that is said about that. We talk a lot about that, and this is something good because we can promote and foster a new way of thinking, and the fact that we start thinking about the importance of this intervention. But the problem is when we talk, or if we talk a lot about this approach, there is also another risk, because there is something that is not correct completely. Well, in general, augmentative and alternative communication is the use of symbols, of pictures, and this is also something else, because the visual strategies and symbols are one of the many tools that we can introduce in this kind of approach. Well, augmentative and alternative communication this is a definition that was made in the year 2005. It is an area of research and clinical and educational practice. And what is important is that we did not just focus on giving a means of expression, but also we start thinking about impairments and handicaps or disabilities that are much broader. It's not just about the fact that they can't speak or speak very badly, but about the fact that it's much more complex and complicated. Let's say in the world, the augmentative and alternative communication is brought forward by AAC. You know AAC, International Society for Augmentative and Alternative Communication, and in the world this is representative, very well representative, even if not in all the countries. In Europe we also have some representatives who have a lot of chapters, while in Italy we have our chapter, which is our chapter for young people, which is going up. When it comes to augmentative and alternative communication, we can say that in the past we used to think about who can do that. So this ACC. ACC can be nowadays very often done by complying with specific preconditions, prerequisites: too small, too young, too old, or he speaks too much, he speaks too little, etc., etc. So this is an idea: too skilled, too few skills, too much skilled, etc., etc. This means that we need an ACC, augmentative and alternative communication, but in this world is combined with a new rehab thinking that overlaps with the introduction of the international classification of function, in which the person is an integral part of a broader system. It's not just about rehab that adjusts the person, but an entire system that must be taken into account. So strength and weaknesses and assets and drawbacks, all those must be considered in a broader approach. The turning point of this new way of thinking about rehabilitation has also led us to rethink about augmentative and alternative communication. So no longer the candidacy model, but the participation model. So the candidacy model was overtaken and replaced by the new participation model, in which we have already something that can be further developed. Where is this carried out and when? It is always done. And the other aspect that makes us very young is that ACC is often done as a kind of therapy. So I use symbols during this therapy hour, and then I'm doing AAC. But in fact, this is something that is much broader, much more complicated, and this is a kind of intervention and not a therapy, which is cross-cutting, in the life, throughout the life of a person. It starts from an assessment, dynamic assessment, and the AAC is something that is really complicated. It's not just a method. This is something that can be customized. And this is something personal. Then the initial assessment is not done just on the person. It is done through remarks, but at first we need to carry out some talks and collect all the information from the environment. We also have to carry out direct tests and remarks, because the environment variable is fundamental. I can have a solution that can be suitable for a child who has difficulties with the communication, but which is which is still not suitable for the environment. So I have to take both factors into account. This AAC is being developed with the age as time goes by, but also thanks to the acquisition of knowledge, both on behalf of the person and on behalf of the environment. So the environment is always involved, and it becomes a kind of facilitator of these proposals. So a new language is set up. What do we do during this dynamic assessment? We want to identify the level of communication, but also the mode of access, modalities of access, and also set up the new steps to take and the new measures for the person and for the environment as well. Compared or as regards the communication levels, we have a lot of different classifications, but the one I chose considers the differences between the level of communication intensity, but also the capacity, the ability, and the reception as well. So in terms of communication, we have to think about that based on a different kind of AAC. Well, more particularly since we are talking about early communication, well, the other aspect of a dynamic assessment, and those who spoke before me helped me a lot, because they have already drew your attention to the fact that these best address methods are not always suitable for person with GNAO1, even if sometimes hands can be used more. So the visual channel is the most important one, eye transfer. and interaction. Why is that so important? Because no child knows how to use the visual aid as a communication means. And it's not just something that concerns children, but also the environment that cannot interact with the surrounding environment. And the child must be given the opportunity to understand the environment where he lives. So if we have no guidance, no orienteering for the child, both in terms of his expectations of what the environment expects from him, but also the way he has to react to things that can happen, well, it is very unlikely that he implements the right choices and makes the right decision. Beforehand, we had very significant point, so this transfer from candidacy model to the participation model. We said, okay, we need some prerequisites. No, we don't need them any longer anymore, and this is the reason why a new field was born. Was created. So symbols plays a key role, and they are not yet functional tool. So this is the so-called learn communication, in which the goal is supporting understanding what I told you before, talking about access. And this is an intervention that is aimed at the creation of situations that are repeated and constant in order to allow people to participate in the communication, and with a view to supporting the maturation of the communication intentionality, the expression of the highest possible level of autonomy, and also a kind of training for the use of the most functional district, because sometimes we do not know nothing about the power of communication. We talked about Wineland, and we said that she talks about reactive behavior. Every child has his own level of autonomy, but it is important to understand where we are in terms of autonomy, and this is another level of complexity, because every single person has a different level. So there is nothing general, let's say, well, the AAC doesn't say, okay, this is the disease, this is the objective, or the functional picture and the objective, etc. And the other aspect is that we have to get trained to the best suitable district. So we want to test new communication channels, both ingoing and ongoing, and both ingoing and outgoing, or outcoming. And this is the reason why incoming and outgoing, sorry. And this is the reason why these cannot be done as a remote exercise. It has no effect. 2, 3, 4, 5 hours of therapy are not enough compared to a daily work. But what happens when we want to reactivate this circuit in which the person is in a world and wants to convey back this message and wants to give a specific meaning to his or her actions in a system in which every time I send a signal I have a contingent answer, and which is always the same, and I can discover it with my autonomy. Well, in this way I have a kind of a circuit that supports this global communication. The person is supported when it comes to going out of this kind of passivity. And this is something that also complies and takes into account the skills of that person. Well, in terms of early communication, if we want to talk about this pathway, well, we talk about very young children. Early communication is a basis for our communication for 3 things. First of all, attract attention, but also accept refusals and denials. And secondly, with continuous work for contingent answers, we also agree upon conventional signals that are not always the standard ones, but they are clear, they are shared, they can be conveyed to every single environment. So doing this means meaning this. And then we also want to expand and extend these basic skills to achieve the joint attention. And before that, we can start thinking about symbolic aspects. All this must be done within a dynamic framework on a daily basis. For early communication, as we heard today, and more in general, well, these tools are a particular way of taking care of the environment, of the posture, and also the positioning of strategies, both in terms of where I want to be, or where I put my toys, where I put my things, my stuff, etc. And the other basic aspect is the support for the environment, so that we learn how to manage and cope with communication. Early communication tools are the so-called are tools that are linked to the person. So we want to respect the time of people who are in difficulty, who are in need. We have to plan, schedule the right timing, not based on our needs. We are adults, we are pre-established times that do not comply or are not suitable for people who are at a specific communication level. We want to rediscover the waiting time that is suitable for the person. This is one of the crucial and critical tools for us. This is very difficult because we are really structured in terms of time management. And also the time must be very stimulating and motivating. And also the toys, having fun, having something that motivates me. I don't want just to make efforts for something if I'm not interested in that. So these opportunity, and I address and I talk above all to those who are in charge of rehab. Well, please be sure that what you propose must be interesting, motivating, and then as time goes by, but also right away, you have a kind of negotiation in terms of education. You have to be able to ask something, that is not to say you can obtain everything, but this is a way of asking something. Maybe there is someone who says, no, we can't do that, or maybe we're not allowed to do that, or we won't do that, or we will do it later on. And also the use of technologies, and also the opportunity to introduce symbol exposure through readapted books. Well, then we have the transfer to symbolic strategies. We can also choose something that is suitable. We have a lot of them that are very, very different, and the way in which we can organize it can be very, very different, can be less or more complicated and complex, both in terms of goals, something new, something I want to learn about, or also in terms of the organization. So this is a table of the choice, and then I have these kind of instruments. For example, these are communication notebooks, or this one which allows me to have a free exchange in terms of communication. The other critical aspect is the technology part. On the one hand, this is a great aid for children, so for children who have something like that. Also talking about visual approaches, well, this is fundamental, but at the same time we have to pay attention, because technology can be also misleading. Sometimes we only focus on the expression, we only focus on tools, so we can get a little bit lost. So technology must be included into a broader framework in which it is just a facilitator, or it is like a feedback of my power of communication. And we also have to add that we do not only have these projects and the tools of vocal output communication aids, for example, an e-tran, which stands for eye transfer, and this is a kind of high-tech eye-pointing system, or a paper notebook also. In conclusion, the most important thing for all of us in terms of communication for the AAC is that the augmentative and alternative communication has as main goal creating a participation, supporting participation, allowing a communication, but also dealing with the understanding, the production, and another important aspect I would like to make reference to also the use of language, which plays a key role. We have a lot of rules that the fact that our word must be effective. This has nothing to do with the word in itself or the tools, is the ability to use it. So this is a crucial aspect. I am able to use a symbol, I know the symbol, I recognize it, I acknowledge it, but it is something different to be able to use it. And AAC also deals with the learning and teaching methods, but also apart from the communication related field and the sector, aims at creating an interior, an inside language. Well, this sentence, this utterance, for example, and the children, they also test these forms to extend language by using language, by making mistakes and errors. If there's always someone who speaks instead of me, then I will never develop this part of the language. And the other crucial aspect is the support for the organization of the action, because in most cases we think about something, we plan it, and then we implement. If you have difficulties with the communication and also movement disorders, then it is very difficult to be independent. So communication AAC is the last aims at the highest expression of the autonomous capacity. So someone who can react to the surrounding world. All this expresses also the level of autonomy and the autonomy I can show. And last but not least, this is something that contributes to the so-called quality of life, something I heard a lot about these days. So this is the main goal of augmentative and alternative communication. That's it.